Hey everybody, I am Tin Tim, that is T-I-N as in Nooner, T-I-M as in Morning Wood. I am America's first drag queen public intellectual, aka the Cornell motherfucking West of drag, coming to you each week with my thoughts on the most recent episode of RuPaul's Drag Race Season 5. The makeover episode is always a very interesting one, not just because it's very challenging and really demands a lot of the queens, but also because it's always in some way kind of political. You know, there's always some element of showing drag and what drag is and what it means to do drag to some outside audience who may or may not understand that or may be standing in judgment of that in some way. Sometimes in past seasons that has sort of annoyed me a little bit. There's like this dynamic of, isn't it so wonderful that these straight men are being really accepting of drag queens, and isn't that just the most like revolutionary thing ever? And you're like, maybe they should just be that way, like period. I sort of hate when people with privilege sort of get overpraised for like affording sort of basic courtesies or decency. So considering all that, I was really happy to see them doing makeovers to other queer people again this year, which we haven't seen, I think, since like season 2, right? And there's always that nice dynamic of like intergenerationality and sort of queer history and connecting across these things. I was real worried when they said it was going to be veterans, that what we would get would be a lot of kind of, you know, yay, rah, America kind of nationalist stuff, which I'm not a super big fan of. I was raised in a pretty sort of radical pacifist type of household. My first, draft card I sent back with the statement that said, I am a conscientious objector to war of all kinds. And to a certain extent, I think I still stand behind that. I definitely have been around other folks like in the social justice and leftist communities that I'm a part of who are like, no, in really fucked up situations, sometimes armed conflict, armed revolution is absolutely necessary. I don't really feel prepared to make that call. But in general, if we're talking about US politics and the US military efforts, what some people call like the military-industrial complex, like all of the sort of money and capital and business, big business that goes into war in the US, I am generally pretty like, not the hugest fan of a lot of our military campaigns from the last multiple decades over the last century. There's been a lot of US military actions that are really about destabilizing governments other places in order to maintain the sort of system of global inequality and the sort of global economic system that keeps us on top, so that's not my favorite thing. But, that said, I've always tried to make an effort to really respect the actual military officers who make the decision to place themselves in situations of danger, take on risk. It's the system that I tend to critique, not the individuals who sometimes are just as exploited as the places that they're being sent to fight, But that said, I was just sort of worried that there would be this sort of like, thank you for fighting for my freedom to fucking high heels kind of vibe to the episode. And thankfully, I felt like they didn't really go there. Instead, it was much more about the difficulties that the officers faced as gay officers under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and even earlier, more punitive systems, like the older officer, his experience with his friends getting court-martialed. And I thought that, it was powerful to hear those stories that were more about oppression and exclusion at the hands of the sort of military structures get shared. The overturn of Don't Ask, Don't Tell or whatever isn't that old yet, and people are still living with the consequences of it. And it's important to know those stories. The story that Alaska's dude shared about, kind of growing up in the foster system and then military kind of being a way to have structure in his life. There is a huge issue in, this country of there really not being any options for people who are in that system. Once they reach the age of 18, the support just cuts off. And that's been an issue for years. I don't want to presume to say that he only joined the military because he had no other options, because that sort of takes away his decision-making power and his agency in making that decision. That's not my place. But I do think that his situation calls attention to that lack of options for folks in the foster care system, in the social service system in our country, and that is also something that is important to look at and discuss. So that's my 2 cents for this week. I wanted to make sure in this video to also thank all of you who voted for me for the Neverland photo contest and helped me win that 2 weeks ago. The photo shoot was this past Wednesday. If you visit my Facebook page, you should be able to find them. My Facebook site is linked in my YouTube profile, but I will also post it in the description for this video, so you can go take a look at them. So thanks again. Much love to you all. Mwah.